Have you ever watched a story that slowly pulls you in, and before you even realize it, you're completely lost inside its world? Predator Badlands is one of those films that doesn't just entertain, it makes you feel every moment. From the very beginning, the movie builds a sense of mystery and tension, where every scene carries meaning and every character hides something deeper beneath the surface. As the story unfolds, you start to see how small decisions lead to unexpected consequences. The film takes you through intense moments, emotional turns, and powerful scenes that keep you hooked till the very end. It's not just about what happens, it's about why it happens and how it changes everything. The characters in this film are not simple. Each one has a purpose, a backstory, and a role that connects to the bigger picture. Their performances bring life to the story, making every scene feel real and impactful. But what truly makes Predator Badlands stand out is the way it was created. The vision behind the story, the effort put into its production, and the ideas that inspired it. Every detail, from storytelling to execution, adds something unique to the overall experience. In this video, we're going to break down the complete story, explore the characters, and analyze everything from its creation to its success. And just to be clear, this is not a full movie or a movie screening. It's a detailed review and analysis made for learning and entertainment purposes. So let's begin and take a closer look at Predator Badlands. Something feels off long before anything actually happens. The air looks still, the land stretches out wide, and yet there is a quiet tension sitting underneath everything, like the world is holding its breath for something it cannot name. That feeling is where Predator Badlands begins, and it wastes no time pulling you into that uneasy silence. This is not just another action-heavy alien hunt. It leans into isolation, survival, and the idea that danger does not always announce itself loudly. Directed by Dan Trachtenberg and led by Elle Fanning and Demetrius Schuster-Kalo-Amatangi, the film sets a tone that feels colder, more grounded, and more personal than what most people expect from this franchise. This is a review and breakdown, not the full movie. The goal here is to walk through the story, explore what it is trying to say, and focus on the moments that matter without replacing the experience of watching it yourself. The film builds slowly, and that pace is important. It lets the environment speak before the characters do, and it makes every small shift feel important. Instead of rushing into action, it chooses to create discomfort first, and that choice shapes everything that follows. The story opens in a remote desert region that looks abandoned but not empty. The land carries signs of past activity, broken structures, scattered equipment, and vehicles that seem to have been left in a hurry. There is no clear explanation yet, and that lack of clarity works in the film's favor. It allows the viewer to feel the same confusion that the characters will soon experience. The camera lingers on details that might seem small at first, like wind moving dust across metal surfaces or the faint sound of something distant that never fully reveals itself. Elle Fanning's character, Mara, enters this world as someone who does not belong to it, at least not yet. She is introduced without dramatic build-up, just stepping into the frame with a sense of purpose that is not fully explained. Her movements are careful, controlled, and observant, which immediately tells you that she understands risk. There is no panic in her behavior, but there is awareness. The film uses her silence effectively, letting her actions define her before any backstory is revealed. What stands out early is how the film treats space. It does not feel like a backdrop. It feels active, like the land itself is watching. Wide shots emphasize how small Mara is compared to her surroundings, and that imbalance creates a quiet pressure. It suggests that whatever threat exists here is not limited to a single location. It could be anywhere, and that uncertainty becomes part of the tension. The sound design supports this idea, with long stretches of near silence interrupted by subtle, unsettling noises. As Mara moves deeper into the area, she starts to notice signs that something is wrong beyond simple abandonment. Tracks in the dirt do not match any known pattern, and some of the damage to structures looks too precise to be accidental. These details are not explained immediately, and the film trusts the audience to sit with that discomfort. It does not rush to answers. Instead, it builds questions, and each question adds another layer to the atmosphere. Demetrius Schuster-Kalo-Amatangi's character, Kellen, is introduced in contrast to Mara. Where she is controlled and observant, he carries visible weight, both physically and emotionally. His first appearance is not heroic or dramatic. He is injured, tired, and clearly not in control of the situation he is in. That choice grounds the story. It removes any sense of invincibility and replaces it with vulnerability. When he and Mara cross paths, the interaction is cautious, not trusting. Their first exchange is brief but loaded. Neither character offers full information, and both seem to be measuring the other. This creates an immediate tension that is different from the external threat. It is personal and uncertain. The film uses this moment to establish that survival here is not just about facing what is out there. It is also about deciding who to rely on and who to keep at a distance. That dynamic becomes important as the story moves forward. The pacing during this section is deliberate. It slows down just enough to let each interaction breathe, but it never feels like it is dragging. Every movement, every glance, and every pause carries meaning. This is where the film separates itself from more traditional entries in the genre. It is less focused on spectacle and more focused on presence. It wants you to feel like you are there, dealing with the same uncertainty as the characters. As Mara and Kellen begin to move together, the environment starts to reveal more of its danger. Small details begin to connect. The strange tracks, the precise damage, and the abandoned equipment all point towards something intelligent. Not just a random threat, but something that chooses where and how it acts. This shift is subtle, but it changes the tone. It turns the situation from a mystery into a hunt, even though the hunter has not been clearly seen yet. One of the strongest choices here is how the film avoids showing too much too soon. There are hints, slight distortions in the air, faint movements that are easy to miss if you are not paying attention. These moments reward focus. They create a sense that the danger is always present, even when it is not visible. This keeps the tension consistent, rather than relying on sudden spikes. Mara's behavior starts to change as she processes what she is dealing with. She becomes more cautious, more strategic, and more willing to take control of the situation. The film shows this through action rather than explanation. She adjusts her path, studies her surroundings more carefully, and begins to anticipate rather than react. This development feels natural because it is built on what has already been established about her character. Kellen, on the other hand, struggles to keep up with that shift. His injuries slow him down, and his experience with whatever happened before this moment weighs on him. There are hints that he has already encountered the threat they are now facing, but he is not ready to fully explain it. This creates another layer of tension. The audience knows that he understands more than he is saying, but the film holds back just enough to keep that information out of reach. As they move further into the Badlands, the sense of isolation becomes stronger. There are no signs of rescue, no communication with the outside world, and no clear way out. This reinforces the idea that whatever is happening here is contained, at least for now. That containment makes the situation feel more intense. It suggests that the characters are not just passing through danger. They are inside it. The first clear indication of the predator's presence comes in a moment that is quiet rather than explosive. A piece of equipment shifts slightly without any visible cause. The movement is small, but it is enough to confirm that something is there. The reaction from Mara and Kellen is immediate but controlled. They do not panic. They observe, they listen, and they prepare. This response keeps the tone grounded and believable. From a review perspective, this opening section does a strong job of setting expectations without giving too much away. It respects the audience's intelligence and avoids over-explaining. It builds tension through restraint, which is not always easy to do in a film like this. The choice to focus on atmosphere and character before action pays off because it makes every later moment feel more significant. The chemistry between the leads is also worth noting. It is not built on trust or familiarity. It is built on necessity. That makes their interactions more interesting because they are constantly shifting. One moment they are aligned, the next they are questioning each other's motives. This unpredictability keeps the dynamic fresh and prevents it from becoming repetitive. By the time this first segment comes to a close, the film has not revealed everything, but it has established enough to pull you in. There is a clear sense of danger, a developing relationship between the characters, and a growing awareness that they are being watched by something they do not fully understand. It does not rush toward confrontation. Instead, it tightens the tension slowly, making each step forward feel heavier than the last. The story is still in its early phase, but the foundation is strong. The world feels real, the threat feels intelligent, and the characters feel grounded. That combination creates a sense of anticipation that carries into the next part. You are not waiting for action just for the sake of it. You are waiting to understand what is out there, how it operates, and whether these characters have any real chance of surviving it. The silence does not break, it tightens. Every step Mara and Kellen take feels heavier now, like the ground itself is aware of them. The earlier uncertainty begins to sharpen into something more focused, more deliberate. It is no longer just about strange signs and abandoned structures. There is a presence here, and it is paying attention. The shift is subtle, but it changes how every movement is perceived. Mara slows her pace, not out of fear but calculation. She starts choosing her path more carefully, avoiding open ground when possible and staying close to anything that offers cover. Her eyes keep scanning, not just in front but around, above, and behind. This is where her character becomes more defined. She is not reacting blindly. She is adapting in real time, and that makes her feel capable without needing to prove it through forced action. Kellen struggles to match that level of control. His breathing grows heavier, and his movements carry tension that he cannot fully hide. There is history in the way he reacts to certain sounds, like he has already faced something similar and did not come out of it clean. When he finally speaks more openly, his words are not detailed, but they carry weight. He makes it clear that what they are dealing with is not random and not new. The film uses this moment to deepen the sense of threat without showing it directly. Kellen describes patterns rather than events. He talks about how the attacks are precise, how nothing is wasted, and how the damage always feels intentional. This approach adds a layer of intelligence to the unseen presence. It suggests strategy, patience, and control. That idea alone makes the situation more dangerous than any visible creature could at this stage. As they move through a narrow stretch of rocky terrain, the environment starts to feel more enclosed. The open desert gives way to tighter spaces, where visibility is limited and every corner becomes a potential risk. The camera reflects this change by staying closer to the characters, reducing the sense of space and increasing the feeling of pressure. It creates a quiet claustrophobia that contrasts with the wide shots from earlier. A small but important moment happens when Mara notices a set of markings on a rock surface. They are not natural, and they do not match anything human. The lines are sharp, deliberate, and placed in a way that feels almost like a message. She does not comment on it immediately, but her reaction shows that she understands its importance. This is not just a hunting ground. It might also be a territory. Kellen's response to the markings is different. He avoids looking at them for too long, like he already knows what they represent. That reaction adds another layer to his character. It shows that his knowledge is not just based on observation. It is based on experience, and that experience has left a mark on him. The film holds back the full explanation, but it gives enough to suggest that his past encounter was personal. The tension builds further when they come across what looks like a temporary camp. It is not intact, but it is recent. Equipment is scattered, supplies are partially used, and there are signs of a struggle that ended quickly. What stands out is the lack of bodies. There is no clear indication of what happened to the people who were here. That absence feels more disturbing than any visible evidence would have. Mara examines the area with precision. She looks for patterns, for signs of movement, for anything that can explain the sequence of events. Her focus is sharp, and it reveals how her mind works. She is not just trying to understand what happened. She is trying to predict what will happen next. This forward-thinking approach sets her apart and positions her as someone who can lead in a situation like this. Kellen, meanwhile, becomes more uneasy. The camp triggers something in him, and his composure starts to slip. He becomes more vocal, more urgent, and less controlled. This contrast between the two characters creates a dynamic that keeps evolving. One is moving toward clarity, The other is being pulled back into uncertainty. That tension between them adds depth to the narrative without slowing it down. The first real sign of direct danger arrives without warning. A faint distortion moves across the edge of the frame, almost invisible but unmistakable once noticed. It does not stay long, but it is enough to confirm that the presence is not just watching from a distance. It is close and it is moving. The reaction is immediate. Mara signals Kellen to stay still, and for a moment, everything freezes. This pause is one of the most effective moments in the film so far. There is no music, no sudden movement, just controlled breathing and heightened awareness. The stillness becomes intense because it is filled with expectation. Something is about to happen, but the film refuses to rush into it. It stretches the moment just enough to make it uncomfortable. When the movement returns, it is faster, more deliberate. It circles rather than approaches directly, testing rather than attacking. This behavior reinforces the idea of intelligence. The threat is not acting on impulse. It is studying them, learning their patterns, and waiting for the right moment. That approach makes it far more dangerous than a simple predator driven by instinct. Mara responds by shifting her position slightly, not to escape but to change the angle. She is trying to disrupt whatever pattern the unseen presence is forming. This small adjustment shows her understanding of the situation. She is not trying to outrun it. She is trying to outthink it. That distinction is important because it changes how the conflict is framed. Kellen, however, reaches his limit. The pressure becomes too much, and he makes a sudden movement that breaks the stillness. It is not a full panic, but it is enough to shift the balance. The environment reacts immediately. The distortion becomes more aggressive, more focused, and the sense of control that Mara had starts to slip. This moment highlights how fragile their situation is. The encounter does not turn into a full attack, but it leaves a clear mark. A piece of equipment is sliced cleanly, not destroyed but cut with precision. The message is clear. The presence is capable, controlled, and choosing not to kill, at least not yet. This decision adds a psychological layer to the threat. It suggests intention beyond survival. It suggests purpose. After the presence pulls back, the atmosphere changes again. The silence returns, but it feels different now. It is no longer just empty. It is aware, almost watching from a distance. Mara and Kellen both understand that they have been assessed, and that realization carries weight. It means that whatever happens next will not be random. It will be calculated. From a review perspective, this section strengthens the film's core identity. It continues to rely on restraint and intelligence rather than spectacle. The threat remains mostly unseen, but it feels more real because of how it behaves. The characters are not just reacting to danger. They are engaging with it on a mental level, and that keeps the tension consistent. The relationship between Mara and Kellen also evolves here. There is still no full trust, but there is a growing recognition of each other's strengths and weaknesses. They start to adjust to each other, not out of comfort but necessity. This gradual shift feels natural because it is driven by the situation rather than forced through dialogue. As they leave the camp behind, the path ahead becomes less clear. The terrain grows more complex, and the signs of the unseen presence become more frequent. The story does not rush forward. It continues to build, layer by layer, creating a sense that everything is leading toward something larger. The danger is no longer a question. It is a certainty. By the end of this part, the film has moved from mystery into active tension. The characters have encountered the threat, even if only briefly, and the rules of the situation are starting to take shape. Survival is not just about strength or speed. It is about awareness, control, and the ability to stay one step ahead of something that is already watching. The pace remains controlled, and that control is what keeps the experience engaging. Nothing feels wasted, and every moment adds to the overall tension. The story is still unfolding, and there is a clear sense that the real conflict has not even begun yet. That anticipation is what carries the narrative forward, pulling you deeper into the world without needing to rely on constant action. The space between movement and stillness becomes harder to read. After that brief encounter, the air feels different, like it has weight now. Mara does not rush forward. She pauses, studies the direction of the disturbance, and then chooses a path that is less direct but more controlled. It is a quiet shift in strategy. She is no longer just navigating terrain, she is navigating something that reacts. Kellen follows, but the gap between them grows slightly. Not physical distance, but mental. He is still inside the moment that just happened, replaying it, trying to understand why they were not attacked. His confusion shows in the way he looks around, expecting something to happen again at any second. That hesitation slows him down, and Mara notices it without saying anything. The terrain begins to change again, transitioning into a dry basin surrounded by jagged rock formations. The ground here is uneven, marked by shallow depressions and hardened cracks that suggest long periods without water. It feels like a place where things come to end rather than pass through. That tone adds a subtle heaviness to the scene, reinforcing the idea that this location holds history. Mara stops at the edge of the basin and crouches, running her fingers lightly across the surface. The marks here are different from what they saw earlier. They are deeper, more chaotic, as if something struggled rather than moved with precision. This contrast catches her attention. It suggests that not everything here follows the same pattern, and that introduces a new layer of uncertainty. Kellen joins her, and for the first time, he speaks with more clarity. He mentions that not all encounters end the same way. Some are clean, controlled, almost surgical. Others turn into something else entirely. His tone carries a quiet warning, like he is trying to prepare her without fully explaining what that means. The lack of detail keeps the tension intact. As they move into the basin, the sound design shifts slightly. The wind becomes less noticeable, replaced by a low, almost distant hum that is difficult to place. It is not constant, but it appears just enough to be unsettling. Mara reacts to it immediately, tilting her head slightly as if trying to isolate its source. This detail adds to the sense that the environment itself is part of the threat. Halfway through the basin, they come across something that changes the tone again. It is not a structure or equipment. It is a body, or what is left of one. The film handles this moment carefully, avoiding graphic detail but making the impact clear. The position, the damage, and the surrounding marks all point to a violent encounter that did not follow the precise pattern seen earlier. Mara studies the scene with focus, not emotion. She is looking for information, not reacting to the loss. That choice reinforces her character. She processes danger by understanding it. Kellen, however, reacts differently. He looks away quickly, his expression tightening, as if this confirms something he was hoping was not true. This contrast deepens the divide between their approaches. What stands out is how the film uses this moment to complicate the threat. It is no longer just a single pattern of behavior. There are variations, and that makes it harder to predict. Mara begins to piece this together, quietly mapping out possibilities in her mind. Her movements become even more deliberate, as if she is adjusting to a new set of rules that are still forming. As they leave the basin, the terrain narrows into a series of winding paths between rock walls. Visibility drops again, and the sense of being watched returns, stronger than before. The earlier encounter now feels like a test rather than a warning. This realization sits beneath every step they take, adding tension without needing any visible confirmation. A small but important detail emerges when Mara notices a faint reflection along one of the rock surfaces. It is brief, almost like a flicker, but it is enough to confirm that the presence is closer than before. She does not stop or react openly. Instead, she adjusts her pace slightly, signaling to Kellen without drawing attention. This controlled response keeps the moment grounded. Kellen picks up on the signal, but his reaction is less steady. His breathing changes, and his grip tightens on what little equipment he has left. The film does not dramatize this. It shows it in small ways, letting the tension build naturally. This approach keeps the focus on realism rather than spectacle. The path leads them to a narrow opening that connects to another section of the Badlands. Before stepping through, Mara pauses again, scanning the area with more intensity than before. She is not just looking for movement. She is trying to anticipate it. This shift in behavior shows how quickly she is adapting, turning observation into strategy. As they pass through the opening, the environment opens up slightly, but the feeling of exposure increases. There is less cover here, fewer places to hide, and more angles from which they can be observed. This change creates a different kind of tension. It is not about what is hidden. It is about what could appear at any moment. The next interaction with the unseen presence is more direct, but still controlled. A small object near Kellen shifts suddenly, moving just enough to draw attention. This time, the movement is not subtle. It is intentional, almost like a signal. Mara stops immediately, her posture tightening as she tries to locate the source. For a brief moment, there is nothing. Then the distortion appears again, clearer than before, moving across the open space with purpose. It does not attack. It does not retreat. It simply moves, allowing itself to be seen just enough to confirm its presence. This choice changes the dynamic completely. It is no longer hiding. Mara holds her ground, resisting the instinct to react. Her focus sharpens, and for the first time, there is a sense that she is engaging directly with whatever is out there. This is not a passive situation anymore. It is an interaction, even if it is unspoken. That shift adds a new layer to the tension. Kellen, however, cannot maintain that level of control. He takes a step back, then another, creating a slight separation between them. It is a small movement, but it matters. The presence reacts instantly, shifting its position in response. This cause and effect reinforces the idea that it is studying them in real time. What follows is not an attack, but a demonstration. The distortion moves rapidly, covering ground in a way that feels calculated rather than chaotic. It circles once, then disappears completely, leaving behind only the memory of its movement. The message is clear. It can strike whenever it chooses, and it knows exactly how to control the situation. After it vanishes, the silence returns again, but this time it feels heavier than before. Mara exhales slowly, not out of relief but focus. She has learned something important, even if she has not said it out loud yet. The presence is not just hunting. It is testing, measuring, and adapting. Kellen looks at her, waiting for some kind of explanation, but she does not offer one. Instead, she starts moving again, her pace steady but more purposeful. This decision shows that she is not overwhelmed. She is processing, adjusting, and preparing. That consistency in her behavior keeps the narrative grounded. From a review perspective, this section does something important. It transitions the threat from unknown to partially understood without losing tension. It reveals just enough to raise the stakes while keeping the full picture out of reach. This balance is difficult to maintain, but the film handles it with control. The character dynamics continue to evolve in a natural way. Mara becomes more central as a strategist, while Kellen represents the emotional weight of past encounters. Neither role feels forced. They complement each other, even as they create tension. This duality adds depth without slowing the pacing. By the end of this part, the story has moved deeper into active engagement. The presence is no longer just observing from a distance. It is interacting, shaping the situation, and forcing the characters to respond. The sense of danger is no longer abstract. It is immediate, controlled, and growing. The path ahead feels more uncertain than ever, not because of what is unknown, but because of what is slowly becoming clear. This is not a situation they can simply escape from. It is something they have to understand, adapt to, and survive on terms that are not their own. The moment after that display lingers longer than expected. It is not just fear that stays behind, it is awareness. Mara keeps walking, but her pace reflects a shift that is easy to miss if you are not paying attention. She is no longer exploring or reacting. She is now moving with intent, as if she has accepted that this is no longer a situation she can avoid. It is something she has to face directly, even if she does not yet understand it fully. Kellen follows closely this time, not out of confidence but necessity. The distance he kept before is gone. That earlier hesitation has turned into something more urgent. He realizes that staying close to Mara is not about trust, it is about survival. His movements are tighter now, more controlled, but there is still tension in every step. That tension keeps building, and the film allows it to sit without release. The landscape ahead stretches into a series of low ridges, each one cutting visibility just enough to create blind spots. It is not as enclosed as before, but it is not open either. This middle ground creates a new type of pressure. There are too many places where something could be hiding, and not enough clarity to feel secure. The camera follows this by shifting angles more frequently, never staying still long enough for comfort. Mara slows as they approach the first ridge, raising her hand slightly to signal a stop. She crouches again, not to inspect the ground this time, but to listen. The film leans heavily into sound here. There is a faint clicking noise, irregular and distant, but present enough to matter. It is the first distinct audio pattern linked to the unseen presence, and it adds a new layer to the threat. Kellen reacts immediately to the sound. His expression tightens, and for a brief moment, it looks like he might speak. But he stops himself. That hesitation says more than words would. It confirms that he recognizes the sound, and that recognition carries weight. Mara notices this, but she does not push him. She is focused on what the sound means right now, not where it comes from. They move over the ridge carefully, keeping low and controlled. On the other side, the ground drops slightly into a shallow clearing. What they find there shifts the tone again, but in a quieter way. There are remnants of something that looks almost organized. Not a full structure, but arranged pieces of equipment, placed in a way that suggests planning rather than abandonment. Mara approaches slowly, scanning for movement before stepping into the clearing. Her attention moves from one detail to another, connecting pieces without needing to speak. The arrangement is not random. It feels deliberate, almost like a setup. This realization changes how she interacts with the space. She is no longer just observing. She is interpreting. Kellen stays near the edge, his eyes moving constantly. He does not trust the clearing, and his instinct is to stay out of it. This difference in approach creates a subtle tension between them. Mara moves forward to understand, while Kellen holds back to avoid. Neither choice feels wrong, but the contrast highlights how differently they process danger. As Mara examines one of the objects, she notices something that pulls her focus. A faint shimmer passes across its surface, almost like heat distortion but sharper, more defined. She freezes, her hand stopping just short of contact. The realization hits quickly. This is not just an object. It is connected to the presence, either as a tool or a marker. The film stretches this moment, allowing the tension to build without interruption. Mara slowly pulls her hand back, her eyes fixed on the subtle distortion. She is not panicking. She is calculating. Every movement is controlled, every breath measured. This level of restraint keeps the scene grounded and prevents it from tipping into exaggeration. Kellen senses the shift even before he fully understands it. He takes a step back, then another, creating distance between himself and the clearing. His instincts are pushing him away, and this time he listens. The earlier hesitation is gone. He knows enough now to recognize when something is wrong, even if he cannot explain it. The response from the unseen presence is immediate but not aggressive. The distortion intensifies slightly, becoming more visible for a brief moment. It does not attack. It does not retreat. It holds position, almost like it is waiting. This pause creates a strange kind of interaction, where both sides are aware of each other but neither is making the first move. Mara breaks the stillness, not with sudden action but with a deliberate shift. She steps back slowly, matching the tension of the moment rather than fighting it. This choice changes the dynamic. It shows that she understands the balance that is being maintained. She is not trying to dominate the situation. She is trying to read it. The distortion fades again, pulling back just enough to become difficult to track. The clearing returns to stillness, but it feels altered now. It is no longer just a space with arranged objects. It is a controlled area, possibly even a testing ground. This idea adds a new layer to the threat. It suggests that the presence is not just moving through the environment. It is shaping it. As they leave the clearing behind, the clicking sound returns, slightly louder this time. It is still irregular, but it feels closer. Mara adjusts her path again, angling toward higher ground. This decision reflects a shift in strategy. She is looking for advantage, even in a situation where control is limited. That mindset keeps her character consistent. Kellen follows, but his focus is divided. He keeps glancing back, as if expecting something to follow them out of the clearing. That lingering fear adds weight to his movements. It slows him down slightly, creating a rhythm that contrasts with Mara's steady pace. The film uses this difference to maintain tension without needing constant external triggers. At the top of the next ridge, the view opens up more than before. The Badlands stretch out in multiple directions, revealing paths, drops, and distant formations that were not visible earlier. This wider perspective should feel like relief, but it does not. It feels exposed. There is nowhere to hide here, and that vulnerability is clear. Mara takes a moment to observe the landscape, her eyes moving across the terrain with precision. She is mapping possibilities, looking for routes, cover, and anything that could be used to their advantage. This is where her role as a strategist becomes more defined. She is not just reacting to the presence. She is planning around it. Kellen stands slightly behind her, his posture tense but stable. He is no longer questioning her movements. He is following them. This shift in their dynamic happens quietly, without dialogue or acknowledgement. It feels earned because it is built on what they have experienced together so far. The next sign of the presence comes in a different form. A faint shadow moves across the ground, not tied to any visible source. It passes quickly, but it is enough to confirm that the threat is not limited to one angle or one level. It can move above, around, and through their space without being easily tracked. This realization raises the stakes again. Mara notices it immediately, her eyes following the path it took. She does not react outwardly, but the change in her posture shows that she understands what it means. The situation is becoming more complex. The presence is not just interacting with them. It is expanding its range, testing different approaches. Kellen sees it a second later, and his reaction is more visible. He turns quickly, scanning the sky and the surrounding ridges, trying to locate something that is no longer there. That delayed reaction highlights the gap between their awareness levels, but it also reinforces how difficult the situation is to read. The film holds on this moment longer than expected, allowing the tension to settle into something heavier. There is no immediate follow-up, no sudden attack or clear escalation. Instead, it leaves the characters and the audience in a state of heightened awareness. This restraint keeps the pacing controlled and prevents the tension from peaking too early. From a review perspective, this section deepens the psychological aspect of the film. The threat is no longer just physical. It is mental. It forces the characters to think, adapt, and question their instincts. This approach keeps the narrative engaging without relying on constant action. The progression remains steady, with each scene adding new information without overwhelming the story. The balance between revelation and mystery is maintained carefully, ensuring that the tension continues to build rather than plateau. The characters evolve alongside the threat, and that parallel development keeps the story cohesive. By the end of this part, the situation feels more controlled but also more dangerous. The characters are learning, adapting, and moving with purpose, but the presence is doing the same. That symmetry creates a sense of inevitability, like both sides are moving towards something that cannot be avoided. The path forward is no longer just about survival. It is about understanding the rules of a system that is still being revealed. And as those rules become clearer, the margin for error becomes smaller. The higher ground does not bring clarity, it brings exposure. From this ridge, the land opens in multiple directions, but each direction feels equally uncertain. Mara stands still for a few seconds longer than before, not out of hesitation but calculation. She is no longer scanning for movement alone. She is trying to predict intent. That shift defines how this next phase begins. Kellen watches her closely, waiting for a decision. His earlier resistance has faded into quiet dependence. He still carries fear, but it is now focused rather than scattered. That focus keeps him moving, even when the situation offers no comfort. The bond between them is still fragile, but it is starting to function like a system, one that relies on contrast rather than agreement. Mara chooses a path that cuts diagonally across the terrain instead of following the more obvious routes. It is a risk, but a calculated one. Straight paths are easier to track, easier to predict. By moving unpredictably, she is trying to break any pattern that the unseen presence might be building. This decision shows how quickly she has adapted to the logic of the threat. As they descend from the ridge, the ground becomes more uneven, scattered with loose stone and narrow drops. Every step requires attention, and that physical demand adds another layer of tension. It slows them down, but it also forces them to stay grounded in the moment. There is no room for distraction here, and the film uses that to maintain focus. The clicking sound returns, but it has changed. It is more frequent now, less distant, and slightly sharper. It no longer feels like a background detail. It feels like communication. Mara pauses again, listening carefully, trying to identify any pattern in the rhythm. There is something deliberate in the spacing, but it is not consistent enough to decode easily. Kellen reacts differently this time. Instead of freezing or pulling back, he leans into the sound slightly, as if trying to confront it. This change in behavior is subtle but important. It shows that his fear is shifting into something more controlled, even if it is still unstable. He is no longer just avoiding the threat. He is trying to understand it in his own way. They reach a narrow ledge that runs along the side of a steep drop. The path is tight, leaving little room to maneuver. Mara steps onto it without hesitation, her balance steady and precise. Kellen follows more cautiously, his movements slower but careful. The environment here limits their options, and that limitation increases the pressure. Halfway across the ledge, the atmosphere tightens again. The air feels heavier, and the clicking sound stops completely. That absence is more noticeable than the sound itself. It signals a shift, a change in behavior that neither of them can ignore. Mara stops, her body going still as she listens for anything else. A faint distortion appears ahead, not moving this time but holding position. It is clearer than before, its outline more defined against the rock surface. For a brief moment, the presence feels almost visible, like it is allowing itself to be seen just enough to establish control. This is not a hidden observer anymore. It is an active participant. Mara does not step back. She studies it, her eyes narrowing slightly as she tries to understand what it wants. There is no immediate threat in its posture, but there is intention. It is blocking the path, not attacking, not retreating. That choice forces a decision. Move forward and engage, or find another way and risk losing ground. Kellen shifts behind her, his breathing steady but tense. He is waiting for her to act, but there is also a sense that he is ready to react if things escalate. This balance between restraint and readiness defines the moment. It is quiet, but it feels close to breaking. Mara makes a small adjustment, stepping slightly to the side rather than forward. It is not an attempt to bypass the presence completely, but to test its response. The distortion reacts instantly, shifting to match her movement. This confirms what she suspected. It is not just watching. It is controlling space. The realization changes everything. This is no longer about avoiding detection or escaping a threat. It is about navigating a system that is actively responding to them. Mara's posture tightens, but her expression remains focused. She understands that direct confrontation here would be a mistake. The environment is too limited, and the presence holds the advantage. She slowly steps back, returning to the position she held before. The distortion does not advance. It holds its ground, maintaining the boundary it has created. This standoff lasts longer than expected, stretching the tension without release. It feels like both sides are waiting for the other to make a mistake. Kellen breaks the stillness with a quiet movement, shifting his weight slightly. It is not enough to trigger an immediate reaction, but it draws the presence's attention. The distortion flickers, adjusting its position just enough to acknowledge him. This small interaction reveals something important. It is tracking both of them independently. Mara notices this and makes a quick decision. She signals Kellen with a subtle gesture, directing him to move back slowly. He hesitates for a second, then follows. As he retreats, the distortion shifts again, dividing its attention between them. This creates a brief moment of imbalance, and Mara uses it. She steps forward quickly, not to attack but to close the distance. The distortion reacts, pulling back slightly, adjusting to the new position. This exchange happens in seconds, but it changes the dynamic. For the first time, Mara forces a reaction instead of responding to one. It is a small shift, but it matters. The presence does not escalate. Instead, it withdraws, fading back into the environment with controlled precision. The path ahead clears, but it does not feel like a victory. It feels like permission, and that is more unsettling. It suggests that the interaction was allowed, not won. Mara does not waste time analyzing it out loud. She moves forward, crossing the remaining section of the ledge with renewed focus. Kellen follows quickly, his earlier hesitation replaced by urgency. The tension does not drop. It changes shape, becoming more internal, more calculated. Once they reach stable ground again, the environment shifts subtly. The rock formations become taller, casting longer shadows that stretch across the path. The light changes, creating areas of contrast that make visibility harder to manage. This new setting feels more controlled, almost designed to limit perception. Mara slows again, adjusting her approach to match the environment. She stays closer to the edges, using the shadows to her advantage. Her movements are quieter now, more deliberate. It is clear that she is thinking several steps ahead, trying to stay unpredictable. Kellen keeps pace, but his focus remains divided between the path ahead and the space behind them. The earlier encounter has left a mark on him. He understands now that the threat is not just following them. It is guiding them, shaping their movement without direct force. The next discovery comes unexpectedly. Tucked between two rock walls is a narrow passage that looks almost hidden. It is not obvious from a distance, and even up close, it feels easy to miss. Mara stops in front of it, studying the entrance carefully. There are markings here again, but they are different from before. These markings are more structured, more intentional. They form patterns that repeat, suggesting a form of communication or classification. Mara traces one of them lightly with her eyes, trying to interpret its meaning. She does not understand it fully, but she recognizes its importance. This is not random. Kellen reacts strongly to this discovery. He steps back, his expression tightening as if he has seen something like this before. This time, he does not stay silent. He warns her, his voice low but firm, that this is not just a marker. It is a boundary. Crossing it means entering something they may not be able to leave. Mara listens, but her focus does not shift. She studies the passage, weighing the risk against the lack of alternatives. The open terrain behind them offers no safety, and the presence has already shown control over that space. This passage, however uncertain, represents a different kind of risk. One that might offer information instead of just danger. She makes her decision without hesitation. She steps toward the entrance, her posture steady, her expression unchanged. Kellen hesitates, then follows, his earlier warnings still hanging in the air. This choice marks a turning point, not in action but in direction. They are no longer just moving through the Badlands. They are entering something within it. From a review perspective, this section builds on the film's strongest elements. It continues to develop the threat as intelligent and controlled, while allowing the characters to evolve in response. The tension remains consistent, driven by interaction rather than spectacle. Every moment feels intentional, and nothing is wasted. The balance between character and environment remains strong. Mara's strategic mindset contrasts with Kellen's emotional awareness, creating a dynamic that keeps the narrative grounded. Their decisions feel earned, shaped by experience rather than convenience. This consistency strengthens the story. By the end of this part, the film has shifted from open survival to controlled engagement. The introduction of boundaries, patterns, and structured space suggests that the threat operates within a system. Understanding that system may be the key to survival, but entering it comes with its own risks. The passage ahead is narrow, dark, and uncertain. It does not promise safety. It promises answers, and those answers may come at a cost. The entrance does not feel like a path. It feels like a decision that cannot be undone. As Mara steps inside, the light shifts immediately, narrowing into thin lines that barely reach the ground. The temperature seems to drop, not in a dramatic way, but enough to make the air feel different. This space is cut off from everything behind them, and that separation is clear from the first few steps. Kellen follows close, his earlier warnings still present in his posture. He keeps glancing back at the entrance as if expecting it to close or change. When it remains the same, that lack of reaction becomes its own kind of discomfort. It suggests that whatever is controlling this place does not need to trap them. It already knows they chose to enter. The passage narrows further as they move in, forcing them to walk single file. Mara leads, her pace slow and deliberate, each step placed with care. Her hand stays close to the wall, not for balance but for awareness. The surface feels smooth in some places, rough in others, as if shaped rather than formed. That detail adds to the sense that this is not just a natural formation. The markings return almost immediately, but here they are more concentrated. They cover sections of the walls in repeating patterns that feel structured and layered. Mara studies them as she moves, not stopping fully but slowing enough to take them in. There is a logic to their placement, a sequence that suggests progression rather than decoration. Kellen reacts more strongly in this space. The closer they move to the markings, the more uneasy he becomes. His breathing shifts again, not out of exhaustion but recognition. When he finally speaks, his voice is quieter than before, almost restrained. He admits that he has seen something like this once, but never this extensive. That single line adds weight without over-explaining. The passage bends slightly, cutting off the last view of the outside. From this point forward, there is no visual connection to where they came from. The isolation becomes complete. The sound changes too. The wind is gone entirely, replaced by a low, steady hum that feels embedded in the walls themselves. It is not loud, but it is constant, and that constancy makes it hard to ignore. Mara pauses at the bend, taking a moment to listen. The hum does not shift, but something else does. A faint clicking returns, softer than before but closer. It echoes slightly in the confined space, making it difficult to pinpoint direction. This distortion of sound adds another layer of complexity. It removes the ability to track the presence in a reliable way. She moves forward again, slower now, her focus divided between the markings and the sound. Every few steps, she glances at the walls, trying to connect patterns, to find repetition or variation that might mean something. This behavior shows how she is adapting, not just to survive, but to understand. That need for understanding drives her forward more than fear. The passage opens slightly into a wider chamber, but it does not offer relief. The ceiling is higher here, but the walls close in tighter, creating a space that feels controlled rather than open. The markings intensify, covering larger sections with more complex patterns. Some areas look layered, as if new markings were added over old ones. At the center of the chamber, there is a structure that stands out immediately. It is not large, but it is precise. Its shape is angular, almost mechanical, and it contrasts sharply with the surrounding rock. Mara approaches it slowly, her attention fully locked on its surface. There is a faint shimmer here again, more stable than before. Kellen stops a few steps behind her, unwilling to get too close. His eyes move between the structure and the walls, as if expecting something to react. This hesitation feels justified. The space itself carries tension, like it is waiting for interaction. The film holds this moment, letting the silence stretch just enough to become uncomfortable. Mara reaches out, but this time she does not stop short. Her hand hovers for a second, then makes contact with the surface. The reaction is immediate but controlled. The shimmer intensifies, spreading outward in a thin wave that moves across the structure and into the walls. The markings around them seem to respond, faintly shifting in tone. Kellen steps back instantly, his reaction sharp but contained. He does not panic, but he is clearly on edge. The chamber feels alive now, not in a literal sense, but in the way it responds. The hum deepens slightly, and the clicking sound stops completely. That silence is deliberate. It feels like attention has been focused directly on them. Mara pulls her hand back, her expression unchanged but her posture tighter. She has triggered something and she knows it. Instead of retreating, she studies the changes, watching how the patterns adjust, how the light shifts along the surfaces. This is not curiosity alone. It is analysis. She is trying to understand cause and effect. The markings begin to settle into a new configuration, one that feels more ordered than before. Lines align, shapes repeat more clearly, and for a brief moment, it almost looks like a system that could be read. Mara steps slightly to the side, changing her angle, trying to see if the pattern holds. This movement is careful, measured. Kellen speaks again, more urgently this time. He warns her that interacting with this place is a mistake. His voice carries more emotion than before, not just fear but frustration. He has seen enough to know that this is beyond simple survival. This is something structured, something controlled at a level they do not fully grasp. Mar does not dismiss him, but she does not stop either. She points out a detail in the pattern, a repetition that suggests direction. Her tone is calm, focused. She is not arguing. She is explaining her reasoning. This exchange highlights their difference again, but it also shows how they are starting to work together, even in disagreement. The chamber shifts subtly again, not in structure but in atmosphere. The air feels heavier, and the hum deepens further, almost like a response to their presence rather than their actions. This distinction is important. It suggests that being here is enough to trigger attention, regardless of what they do. A faint movement appears along the far wall. Not a distortion this time, but a reflection that moves independently of any visible source. It is brief, but it is enough to confirm that the presence is inside this space with them. The realization lands without panic. It settles into the tension that has been building. Mara turns slightly, her focus shifting from the structure to the wall. She does not rush, but her awareness sharpens. This is the closest they have been to the presence in a confined space, and the lack of escape routes changes the stakes. Every movement matters more here. Kellen steps closer now, closing the distance between them. His earlier instinct to keep space is gone. In this environment, separation feels more dangerous than proximity. This shift reinforces how the space itself is shaping their behavior. It is forcing decisions without direct action. The presence does not reveal itself fully, but its position becomes clearer. The reflection shifts again, tracing a path along the wall that suggests movement without form. It is controlled, precise, and deliberate. It is not rushing, not testing. It is observing at close range. Mara holds her position, resisting the urge to turn completely. She understands that sudden movement could change the dynamic. Instead, she adjusts her stance slightly, keeping the presence within her peripheral vision. This level of control shows how far she has come since the beginning. The chamber remains still otherwise. No attack, no escalation, just a sustained moment of awareness. This restraint is what makes the scene effective. It builds tension without release, forcing the audience to sit inside the uncertainty rather than escape it. After a few long seconds, the reflection fades, pulling back into the surface until it disappears completely. The hum softens slightly, and the markings return to their previous state. The structure at the center dims, losing its earlier intensity. The chamber resets, but the feeling does not. Mara exhales slowly, not out of relief but acknowledgement. She has learned something, even if she cannot fully explain it yet. The presence is not just interacting with them. It is evaluating them within its own environment. That idea changes the stakes again. Kellen looks at her, waiting for a decision. His earlier resistance has shifted into something more aligned. He still fears what this place represents, but he understands that leaving without learning anything may be worse. This internal conflict shows clearly in his expression. Mara steps away from the structure, her focus returning to the passage on the other side of the chamber. There is another exit, partially hidden by shadow and markings. It is not obvious, but it is there. She studies it briefly, then begins to move toward it. Kellen follows without hesitation this time. The dynamic between them has shifted again, becoming more unified. They are not fully aligned, but they are no longer pulling in opposite directions. This change feels earned, shaped by what they have experienced together. From a review perspective, this section expands the world in a meaningful way. It introduces structure, pattern, and a sense of system without over-explaining. The threat becomes more complex, not just a hunter but part of an environment that it understands completely. The pacing remains controlled, allowing each detail to settle before moving forward. The tension is sustained through interaction rather than action, and that choice keeps the experience engaging. The film continues to trust its audience, offering pieces rather than full answers. By the end of this part, the story has moved deeper into the unknown. The characters are no longer just surviving in the Badlands. They are navigating something built within it, something that operates on its own rules. Understanding those rules may be the only way forward. The next passage waits ahead, darker, narrower, and filled with the same quiet tension that has followed them from the beginning. This time, however, they are not stepping into it blindly. The second passage feels different from the first one almost immediately. It is narrower, forcing Mara and Kellen even closer together, and the air carries a faint metallic scent that was not present before. The light fades faster here, leaving long stretches where the walls are only partially visible. This is not just deeper into the structure. It feels like a more controlled layer of it. Mara slows her pace further, adjusting to the reduced visibility. Her movements become more deliberate, each step placed with intention. She keeps one hand near the wall again, not to guide herself but to stay connected to the space. The surface here is smoother, more uniform, which reinforces the idea that this area has been shaped with purpose. Kellen stays close behind, his earlier tension now focused into quiet awareness. He is no longer reacting to every sound or movement. Instead, he watches Mara, following her rhythm, trusting her judgment even if he does not fully understand it. This shift in his behavior feels grounded, built on everything they have gone through so far. The hum returns, but it has changed again. It is deeper, more layered, almost like multiple tones overlapping. It does not come from a single direction. It feels embedded in the entire passage. This creates a sense that the space itself is active, not just a container but part of whatever system they have entered. The markings along the walls become more refined. They are no longer scattered or layered randomly. They follow a clearer pattern, repeating at consistent intervals. Mara notices this immediately, her eyes moving along the sequence as she walks. There is a rhythm to it, one that suggests progression, like steps in a process. After several minutes of slow movement, the passage opens into another chamber, smaller than the last but more defined. The walls curve inward slightly, creating a contained space that feels almost deliberate in its shape. At the center, there is no structure this time, but the floor itself is marked in a circular pattern that stands out clearly. Mara stops at the edge of the circle, studying it before stepping in. The markings here are sharper, more precise, and arranged in a way that feels intentional rather than decorative. They form a sequence that draws the eye inward, toward the center point. This design creates a subtle pull, almost like an invitation. Kellen hesitates behind her, his instinct telling him to stay out of it. He has learned enough to recognize that central spaces like this are not neutral. They are meant for something. When he finally speaks, his voice is low but firm. He suggests they move around it instead of through it. Mara considers this for a moment, her eyes still fixed on the pattern. She does not dismiss his concern, but she also does not step away. Instead, she shifts slightly, moving along the edge of the circle rather than entering it directly. This compromise reflects her approach. She is willing to adjust, but not retreat. As she moves along the edge, something changes. The hum deepens slightly, and the markings on the floor respond with a faint glow, barely visible but enough to confirm a connection. Mara stops immediately, her focus sharpening. This is not passive. The space is reacting to proximity. Kellen steps back instinctively, putting distance between himself and the circle. His reaction is quick, almost automatic. The earlier confidence he gained fades slightly in this moment, replaced by a familiar tension. He watches Mara closely, waiting to see how she handles the shift. Mara does not step into the circle, but she does not retreat either. She adjusts her position again, moving just outside the boundary, testing the response. The glow fades slightly but does not disappear. This suggests that the reaction is not binary. It is responsive, adjusting based on their position. A faint clicking returns, but this time it is sharper, more defined, and closer than before. It echoes within the chamber, bouncing off the curved walls in a way that makes it difficult to locate. Mara tilts her head slightly, trying to isolate it, but the sound refuses to settle into a single direction. Then the distortion appears again, but this time it is inside the chamber with them, not at a distance. It moves along the wall first, tracing the curve slowly, almost deliberately. It does not hide as much as before. Its outline is clearer, more stable, like it is choosing to be seen. Kellen freezes, his body going rigid for a moment. This is the closest they have been in an open space like this, and the lack of barriers makes it more intense. His breathing slows, controlled but strained. He does not move, understanding that any sudden action could change the situation. Mara remains steady, her focus locked on the movement. She does not step forward or back. She holds her position, letting the presence move around them. This stillness is not passive. It is controlled, a decision to observe rather than react. The distortion completes a slow arc along the wall, then pauses across from them. For a brief moment, it becomes more defined, almost forming a shape that suggests structure beneath the invisibility. It is not fully visible, but it is enough to confirm that this is not just energy or illusion. There is something physical there. The chamber reacts subtly. The markings on the floor brighten slightly, and the hum shifts in tone. This synchronized response suggests that the presence and the environment are connected. They are not separate elements. They are part of the same system. Mara takes a slow step forward, not into the center, but closer to the boundary. This movement is deliberate, controlled. She is testing the response again, but this time with the presence directly involved. The distortion reacts immediately, shifting its position slightly, maintaining distance but adjusting its angle. Kellen watches this exchange with growing tension. He understands what Mara is doing, but that does not make it easier to accept. This is no longer just observation. It is interaction at a level that feels unpredictable. His instinct is to pull her back, but he holds himself in place. The clicking sound changes again, becoming more rhythmic, almost structured. It no longer feels random. It feels like a signal. Mara notices this shift, her expression tightening slightly as she listens. There is a pattern forming, but it is not clear yet what it represents. The distortion moves again, this time crossing part of the chamber rather than staying along the wall. It does not approach directly, but it closes the distance slightly, reducing the space between them. This movement increases the tension immediately. The balance is shifting. Mara does not step back. She holds her ground, her posture steady. This choice feels risky, but it is consistent with her approach. She is trying to understand the limits of this interaction, to see how far it can go without triggering aggression. Kellen finally moves, but not forward. He shifts to the side, creating a different angle between himself, Mara, and the presence. This change alters the dynamic slightly, introducing a new variable into the interaction. The distortion reacts, adjusting its position again, tracking both of them. For a few seconds, everything holds. The hum, the glow, the clicking, all of it aligns into a tense stillness that feels like a threshold. Something is about to change, but it is not clear how. The film stretches this moment, letting the tension build without release. Then, without warning, the markings on the floor pulse once, a brief surge of light that moves outward from the center. The distortion reacts instantly, pulling back toward the wall, its form becoming less defined again. The clicking stops completely, and the hum drops in intensity. The chamber settles, but the atmosphere remains charged. Mara exhales slowly, her focus still locked on where the presence moved. She has learned something again, even if it is incomplete. There are triggers here, responses that can shift the balance, but they are not fully understood. Kellen steps closer to her now, the earlier distance gone. His expression shows a mix of relief and concern. He is still on edge, but there is also a growing recognition that Mara's approach is working, even if it is risky. This acceptance changes how he carries himself. Mara steps back from the boundary, choosing not to push further. This decision feels important. It shows restraint, an understanding that pushing too far without clarity could lead to consequences they are not ready for. She turns her attention toward the far side of the chamber, where another passage waits. This exit is less obvious than the one before, partially hidden by shadow and curvature. It does not draw attention to itself. It feels like it is meant to be found rather than seen. Mara studies it briefly, then begins to move toward it, her pace steady. Kellen follows without hesitation. The dynamic between them is now more aligned than at any point before. They are still different in how they process the situation, but they are moving together with purpose. This shift feels earned, built through tension rather than resolved through dialogue. As they leave the chamber, the hum fades slightly, and the markings return to a more neutral state. The presence does not follow immediately, or at least not visibly. That absence creates a strange kind of relief, but it is not comfort. It feels temporary, like a pause rather than an end. From a review perspective, this section pushes the film deeper into its core idea. The threat is no longer just something to survive. It is something to engage with, to understand, even if that understanding comes slowly and at risk. The environment continues to play an active role, shaping every interaction. The pacing remains controlled, allowing each moment to develop fully before moving on. The tension is sustained through interaction and uncertainty rather than sudden action. This approach keeps the experience immersive and consistent with the tone established earlier. By the end of this part, the story has reached a point where the characters are no longer just reacting. They are participating in a system that is responding to them in real time. That shift raises the stakes in a meaningful way, setting up what comes next without rushing toward it. The passage ahead is darker, quieter, and carries a sense that they are moving closer to something central. Not just deeper into the structure, but closer to whatever controls it. The next passage strips away even the small sense of familiarity they had built. It is tighter, darker, and more uniform, as if variation has been removed on purpose. The walls no longer show scattered markings. Instead, they carry long continuous lines that run parallel, stretching forward without interruption. This design creates a feeling of direction, like the space is guiding them whether they want it or not. Mara notices the shift immediately. Her pace slows, but not out of hesitation. She is adjusting again, reading the environment as it changes. These lines are not random. They are too consistent, too precise. She traces them with her eyes as she walks, trying to understand their purpose. They feel less like symbols and more like instructions. Kellen follows close, his earlier unease returning in a quieter form. He is not reacting outwardly, but his attention sharpens. His eyes move constantly, scanning the walls, the floor, the narrow ceiling above them. This space feels less like something abandoned and more like something active. That difference weighs on him. The hum deepens further here, but it becomes more focused. Instead of filling the entire space, it seems to pulse in intervals, almost like a controlled rhythm. Each pulse is subtle, but consistent enough to notice. Mara pauses briefly, listening, trying to match the rhythm to the lines on the wall. There is a connection there, but it is not obvious yet. They continue forward, and the passage begins to slope downward. The descent is gradual, but steady, pulling them deeper into the structure. The air grows heavier again, and the metallic scent becomes stronger. It is not overwhelming, but it is persistent. It reinforces the sense that they are moving towards something central. After several minutes, the passage widens slightly, just enough to allow them to walk side by side. This change feels intentional. It breaks the confinement just enough to shift their awareness. Mara takes the opportunity to glance at Kellen, a brief check rather than a full exchange. He nods once, a silent confirmation that he is still with her. The lines along the walls begin to change here. They start to intersect, forming more complex patterns that break the earlier uniformity. These intersections are not random. They occur at consistent intervals, creating points that stand out visually. Mara slows again, studying one of these intersections more closely. At each point, there is a faint indentation in the wall, almost like a mark left by repeated contact. Mara reaches out, hovering her hand near one of them without touching. She remembers the earlier reaction in the chamber and chooses restraint. Instead of contact, she observes, looking for any sign of response. Nothing happens at first. The hum continues, steady and controlled. But as she lingers near the indentation, the rhythm shifts slightly. It is subtle, almost easy to miss, but it is there. The pulse tightens, becoming more frequent for a brief moment before returning to normal. This response confirms her suspicion. These points matter. Kellen notices the shift too, his posture tightening slightly. He looks at the indentation, then at Mara, waiting for her to decide what to do next. There is tension here, but it is quieter than before. It feels more focused, less reactive. They are learning how to exist in this space without triggering it unnecessarily. Mara steps back, choosing not to interact further. This decision reflects growth. Earlier, she pushed for understanding through action. Now, she balances that with restraint. She is starting to read the system rather than test it blindly. This change in approach keeps the tension controlled. They move on, following the passage as it continues to descend. The intersections become more frequent, and the patterns grow more complex. The space feels less like a corridor and more like a network. Each section connects to the next in a way that suggests structure, not randomness. The next shift comes without warning. The hum stops. It does not fade. It cuts off completely, leaving behind a silence that feels heavier than any sound. Mara stops instantly, her body going still as she listens for anything else. The absence is complete. Even the faint ambient noise that had been present before is gone. Kellen reacts a second later, his breath catching slightly before he controls it. This silence is different from anything they have experienced so far. It feels deliberate, like a reset or a signal. He looks around, searching for movement, but there is nothing visible. Then the clicking returns, but it is different again. It is sharper, faster, and no longer echoes. It comes from a single direction now, clear and direct. Both of them turn toward it at the same time, their focus aligning without needing to speak. At the end of the passage, a faint distortion appears, but this time it does not move. It holds position, more defined than ever before. The outline is clearer, the edges more stable. For the first time, it feels like they are not just sensing the presence. They are facing it. Mara does not move forward immediately. She studies it, her eyes narrowing slightly as she takes in the details. There is something different here, something more direct. The earlier encounters felt like observation and testing. This feels like a confrontation, even without aggression. Kellen steps slightly to the side, not retreating but adjusting his position. His earlier fear is still there, but it is controlled. He is no longer overwhelmed by it. Instead, he channels it into awareness, keeping his focus sharp. This change shows how much he has adapted. The distortion shifts slightly, not approaching but adjusting its angle. It is responding to their presence in a more direct way. The clicking pattern changes again, slowing slightly, becoming more deliberate. It almost feels like a form of communication, even if it is not understood. Mara takes a slow step forward. The movement is controlled, measured. She is not rushing into confrontation. She is testing the space between them. The distortion reacts immediately, holding its ground but becoming more defined. The air around it seems to bend slightly, revealing hints of structure beneath. For a brief moment, the outline becomes clearer than ever before. It suggests height, shape, and movement, but not enough to fully reveal what it is. The film holds this moment carefully, giving just enough to confirm presence without removing mystery. Kellen's reaction is steady, but tense. He watches closely, his attention locked on the distortion. He does not speak, does not move unnecessarily. He understands that this moment matters. It is not just another encounter. It is a shift in how the presence is engaging with them. The space between them tightens, not physically but psychologically. Every small movement feels amplified. The lack of sound makes each breath, each shift in posture more noticeable. This controlled silence adds weight to the interaction. Mara takes another step, closing the distance slightly more. The distortion does not retreat this time. It holds position, allowing the gap to narrow. This is new. It suggests a change in behavior, a willingness to engage at a closer range. The clicking stops abruptly. In that instant, the distortion flickers, then stabilizes again, closer than before. The air around it sharpens, and for a split second, there is a clearer glimpse of something beneath the distortion. Not enough to fully see, but enough to confirm that this is not just an invisible force. It is a presence with form. Kellen exhales slowly, the tension in his body visible but controlled. He is witnessing something that confirms his earlier fears, but also something that changes them. This is not just a hunter in the distance. It is here, present, aware, and choosing how to engage. Mara stops where she is, holding the distance. She does not push further. She understands that this moment is not about advancing. It is about maintaining balance. Her posture remains steady, her focus unbroken. For several seconds, nothing changes. The distortion holds, Mara holds, and Kellen remains still. This standoff is quieter than any confrontation, but it carries more weight. It feels like a threshold, one that could break in either direction. Then, slowly, the distortion shifts back. It does not disappear completely. It moves just enough to create space again, re-establishing a boundary. The clicking does not return, and the silence remains. This retreat is controlled, not reactive. It feels intentional. Mara watches it carefully, tracking the movement without following. She understands that this is not an opportunity to chase. It is part of a pattern she is still trying to decode. That restraint keeps the tension intact. Kellen relaxes slightly, but only enough to breathe more evenly. The pressure does not lift. It changes shape, becoming something quieter but just as present. He looks at Mara, waiting for her to decide the next step. Mara glances at the path ahead, then back at where the distortion moved. She processes both options quickly. Following directly could lead to confrontation on terms they do not control. Moving forward keeps them within the structure but allows them to maintain their pace. She chooses forward. This decision is simple but significant. It shows that she is not chasing the presence. She is navigating the system. That difference defines her role moving forward. Kellen follows without hesitation. The earlier divide between them is gone now. They are aligned in purpose, even if their internal reactions differ. This unity strengthens the narrative without removing tension. As they move past the point where the distortion stood, the hum does not return immediately. The silence stretches, creating a sense of transition. It feels like they have crossed into a new layer of the structure, one where the rules may shift again. From a review perspective, this section marks a clear progression in the film's tension. The presence becomes more defined, more direct, but still controlled. It avoids full revelation, maintaining mystery while increasing stakes. This balance keeps the engagement strong. The characters continue to evolve naturally. Mara's strategic control and Kellen's grounded awareness now work together rather than against each other. This alignment feels earned, shaped by shared experience rather than forced development. By the end of this part, the story has moved into a more direct phase of interaction. The distance between the characters and the presence has narrowed, not just physically but conceptually. They are no longer guessing. They are beginning to understand. The path ahead is quieter, but that quiet carries weight. It suggests that something larger is waiting, something closer to the core of whatever this place truly is. The silence stretches longer than expected, and it starts to feel structured rather than empty. Every step Mara and Kellen take echoes slightly against the smooth walls, but even that sound feels contained, like the space is absorbing more than it reflects. The absence of the hum does not create relief. It creates focus. Without that constant layer, every small detail becomes sharper. Mara adjusts first. Her pace remains steady, but her posture changes slightly. She is more alert now, not just to movement but to absence. The lack of response from the environment feels intentional, and she treats it that way. Her eyes move across the walls, searching for any shift in pattern or texture that might signal a change. Kellen follows closely, his earlier tension settling into a controlled awareness. He is no longer reacting to every change. Instead, he mirrors Mara's restraint, keeping his movements minimal and precise. This shift in his behavior shows how much he has adapted. He is still affected, but he is no longer overwhelmed. The passage continues forward before opening gradually into a wider space. Unlike the previous chambers, this one does not reveal itself all at once. It expands slowly, the walls pulling back just enough to create a sense of scale without fully exposing it. The lighting changes here as well, becoming softer but more diffuse, making it harder to define edges clearly. At the center of this space, there is no obvious structure. Instead, the floor is layered in concentric patterns that ripple outward from a central point. These patterns are more complex than anything they have seen so far. They are not just markings. They feel active, like they are part of a system that is constantly adjusting. Mara steps into the chamber carefully, her eyes fixed on the patterns beneath her feet. Each step is measured, placed between the lines rather than on them. This instinctive choice reflects her growing understanding. She is no longer testing randomly. She is making decisions based on what she has observed. Kellen enters more cautiously, staying slightly behind her. His focus shifts between the floor and the surrounding walls, which now appears smoother than before, almost reflective in certain angles. This reflective quality creates faint distortions that make it difficult to judge depth accurately. It adds another layer of uncertainty. As they move further in, the silence begins to shift. It is not replaced by the hum or the clicking. Instead, there is a faint vibration, barely noticeable at first. It feels less like a sound and more like a pressure, something that can be felt rather than heard. Mara pauses, recognizing the change immediately. She lowers her stance slightly, placing one hand close to the ground without touching it. The vibration intensifies for a brief moment, then stabilizes. This reaction confirms that the chamber is responsive, but in a different way than before. It is not reacting to movement alone. It is responding to presence. Kellen steps closer, his expression tightening as he feels the same shift. He does not speak, but his posture shows that he understands the stakes. This space is not passive. It is aware in a way that feels more direct than anything they have encountered so far. The patterns on the floor begin to change subtly. Lines shift, curves tighten, and the overall structure becomes more defined. It is not a dramatic transformation, but it is enough to confirm that the system is active. Mara watches closely, tracking the changes as they happen. Then the distortion appears again. This time, it does not emerge from the walls or the edges. It forms near the center of the chamber, directly within the patterned area. The outline is clearer than ever before, its presence more stable, less flickering. It stands in place, not moving, as if it has chosen this exact position. Mara does not approach immediately. She studies it, her eyes scanning the space around it as much as the presence itself. The placement matters. It is not random. It is central, deliberate. That choice suggests control, not just of movement but of environment. Kellen shifts slightly, his body tense but steady. He keeps his distance, respecting the boundary that has formed. His earlier instinct to retreat is gone, replaced by a cautious readiness. He understands now that distance alone does not equal safety. The vibration in the chamber deepens slightly as the presence holds its position. The patterns on the floor respond, aligning more clearly around the central point. This synchronization creates a sense of structure that was not as apparent before. It feels like everything in this space is connected. Mara takes a slow step forward, not toward the center but along the outer edge of the patterns. She is testing the system again, but with more precision than before. Her movement is deliberate, controlled, and measured against what she has learned. The presence reacts, but not by moving. Instead, the distortion sharpens, its outline becoming more defined. The air around it seems to tighten, creating a clearer separation between it and the surrounding space. This response feels like acknowledgement rather than warning. Kellen watches closely, his focus locked on the interaction. He does not move, understanding that adding another variable could disrupt whatever balance is forming. His restraint here shows growth. He is no longer acting on instinct alone. Mara continues along the edge, completing a slow arc around the chamber. As she moves, the patterns beneath her shift slightly, aligning with her path. This reaction suggests that the system is not fixed. It is adapting in real time, responding to movement and position. The presence remains at the center, but its orientation changes. It turns slightly, tracking her movement without leaving its position. This behavior reinforces the idea that it is not just observing. It is engaging within a set of rules. The vibration intensifies again, and for a brief moment, the entire chamber feels like it is holding tension. Mara stops, recognizing the threshold. She has reached a point where further movement could trigger a stronger response. This awareness keeps her grounded. She shifts her weight slightly, stepping back just enough to reduce the pressure. The chamber responds immediately, the vibration easing, the pattern stabilizing. This cause and effect is clear, and it gives her something to work with. Kellen exhales quietly, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. He is starting to see the pattern as well, the way the environment responds to specific actions. This understanding does not remove the danger, but it makes it more manageable. The presence moves for the first time in this chamber. It steps forward slightly, closing a small portion of the distance. The movement is smooth, controlled, and deliberate. It is not aggressive, but it is assertive. It changes the dynamic immediately, reducing the space between them. Mara holds her ground, her posture steady. She does not step back this time. Instead, she watches closely, trying to understand the intent behind the movement. This is not a reaction. It is a decision made by the presence. The patterns on the floor react again, tightening around the central area. The lines become more defined, creating a clearer boundary between the center and the outer edge. This shift suggests that the space itself is reinforcing the interaction. Kellen takes a small step to the side, adjusting his position to maintain a clear view. His movement is careful, controlled. The presence reacts slightly, shifting its orientation to account for him as well. This confirms that it is tracking both of them independently. For a few seconds, everything holds again. The chamber, the presence, and the characters exist in a balanced tension that feels almost structured. It is not chaotic. It is controlled, like a system running through a sequence. Mara makes a small gesture, raising her hand slightly, not toward the presence but outward, testing if the system responds to non-movement cues. The vibration shifts subtly, but the patterns remain stable. This suggests that physical position matters more than gesture alone. She lowers her hand, processing the result quickly. Every small test adds to her understanding, building a framework that she can use moving forward. This methodical approach keeps her grounded, even as the situation grows more complex. The presence shifts again, this time stepping back slightly, returning to its original position at the center. The movement is smooth, controlled, and intentional. It feels like a reset, a return to a baseline state. The chamber responds in kind. The patterns relax, the vibration softens, and the overall tension decreases slightly. This synchronization reinforces the connection between the presence and the environment. They are not separate forces. They are part of the same system. Mara takes a slow step back, mirroring the movement. The chamber stabilizes further, the patterns settling into a more neutral configuration. This mutual adjustment creates a brief moment of balance, where neither side is pushing forward. Kellen moves closer again, reducing the distance between himself and Mara. His posture is still tense, but there is more control now. He is not reacting blindly. He is following the rhythm of the interaction, even if he does not fully understand it. Mara turns her attention toward the far side of the chamber, where another passage is partially visible. It is wider than the previous ones, but darker, as if it leads into a deeper section of the structure. She studies it briefly, weighing the risk. The presence remains at the center, holding its position. It does not follow or block their path. This lack of interference feels deliberate. It suggests that the interaction here has reached a point of completion, at least for now. Mara makes her decision. She steps away from the patterned area, moving toward the next passage. Her pace is steady, her posture controlled. She is not rushing, but she is not hesitating either. Kellen follows immediately, his earlier doubts replaced by quiet determination. The dynamic between them is now fully aligned. They are moving as a unit, each understanding their role within the situation. As they leave the chamber, the vibration fades, and the patterns return to a more neutral state. The presence remains behind, its outlines still visible for a brief moment before it fades back into distortion. From a review perspective, this section marks a major shift in how the threat is presented. It is no longer just a hunter or an observer. It is part of a structured system that interacts with the characters in controlled ways. This adds depth without removing tension. The pacing continues to hold, allowing each interaction to develop fully. The film avoids rushing into action, choosing instead to build complexity through behavior and response. This approach keeps the narrative engaging and consistent. By the end of this part, the story has moved into a deeper level of understanding. The characters are no longer guessing. They are learning, adapting, and beginning to navigate the system with intention. That progression sets the stage for what lies ahead. The next passage waits, darker and more uncertain, suggesting that they are moving closer to something central, something that may finally reveal the purpose behind all of this. The transition into the next passage feels heavier than anything before it. The moment Mara crosses the threshold, the air changes again, becoming denser, almost resistant. It is not something that slows movement physically, but it creates a subtle pressure that is impossible to ignore. This is not just deeper. It feels closer to the core of whatever this place is. The walls here are darker, absorbing what little light reaches them. The smoothness from earlier sections is gone, replaced by a surface that looks layered, almost organic in texture. It is not rough in a natural way. It feels constructed, but with a purpose that is harder to define. Mara notices this immediately, her eyes tracing the surface as she moves. Kellen follows, his focus narrowing again. The alignment they had built remains, but the tension returns in a different form. It is quieter, more internal, like both of them understand that the margin for error is shrinking. There is less room here for testing and adjustment. Every decision carries more weight. The silence from the previous chamber does not hold. Instead, a low-frequency hum returns, deeper than before, almost like a distant vibration that resonates through the walls and the ground at the same time. It is steady but not constant. It pulses slowly, creating a rhythm that feels deliberate. Mara pauses after a few steps, listening carefully. She closes her eyes briefly, focusing on the pattern of the pulses. There is a sequence to it, longer intervals followed by shorter ones. It is not random. It feels like a signal, or perhaps a system maintaining itself. This detail shifts her approach again. Kellen watches her, waiting. He has learned not to interrupt these moments. His role has become more supportive, more reactive to her decisions. This change in dynamic feels natural now, built through everything they have faced together. The passage slopes downward again, but more sharply this time. The descent feels more intentional, like it is pulling them towards something specific. The air grows colder, and the metallic scent intensifies, mixing with something else that is harder to identify. It adds to the sense that they are entering a space that is not meant for them. As they move deeper, the markings return, but they are no longer scattered or patterned in simple ways. They form dense clusters, overlapping and intersecting in ways that feel complex and layered. Mara slows, studying them as she walks, trying to identify any repetition. At first, it seems chaotic, but then she notices something. Certain shapes repeat at irregular intervals, forming a pattern that is not immediately obvious. It is not linear. It is cyclical. This realization changes how she reads the space. It suggests that the system here operates in loops rather than sequences. Kellen notices her focus and glances at the markings as well, but his understanding is different. He does not try to decode them. He watches for changes, for reactions, for anything that might signal danger. His awareness is grounded in experience rather than analysis, and that balance between them continues to work. The passage opens suddenly into a much larger chamber, the largest they have seen so far. The scale is immediate and overwhelming. The ceiling rises high above, disappearing into shadow, while the walls stretch outward in curved arcs that make the space feel almost circular. At the center of this chamber stands a structure unlike anything before. It is tall, angular, and layered, rising from the ground in sections that look both mechanical and organic. Its surface shifts subtly, like it is not entirely solid. Lines of faint light run across it, connecting different parts in a way that suggests internal movement. Mara stops at the edge of the chamber, her attention fully locked on the structure. This is different. This is not just part of the system. It feels like the core of it. The way the space is arranged, the way everything seems to lead here, makes that clear. Kellen steps beside her, his expression tightening as he takes in the scale. This is the first time the environment has felt overwhelming rather than controlled. The size alone changes the dynamic, making them feel smaller, more exposed. The hum deepens as they enter, becoming more pronounced, more layered. It resonates through the chamber, creating a constant pressure that sits beneath everything. Mara steps forward slowly, her movements careful but purposeful. The floor here is different as well. The patterns are more complex, layered in multiple directions, forming a network that connects to the central structure. Each line seems to lead toward it, reinforcing the idea that this is the focal point. As Mara moves closer, the structure reacts. The faint lines of light intensify, spreading outward across its surface in a controlled wave. The hum shifts in tone, becoming sharper for a brief moment before settling again. This response confirms what she suspected. This is not just a passive element. It is active, responsive, central. Kellen stops a few steps behind her, his instinct telling him not to get too close. He watches the structure carefully, looking for any sign of movement beyond the light. His tension is visible but controlled. He is no longer panicking. He is assessing. Mara continues forward, but slower now. Each step feels measured against the reaction of the structure. She is not just approaching. She is interacting. The space between her and the structure feels charged, like it is holding potential. Halfway to the center, the distortion appears again. This time, it is not subtle. It forms directly in front of the structure, larger and more defined than ever before. The outline is clearer, the movement more stable. For the first time, there is a strong sense of physical presence beneath the distortion, not just a suggestion. Mara stops immediately, her focus shifting from the structure to the presence. The two are clearly connected, positioned in a way that suggests hierarchy or function. This is not just another encounter. This feels central. Kellen steps forward slightly, closing the distance between them. His earlier hesitation is gone, replaced by a controlled readiness. He understands that this moment is different, that whatever happens here will define everything that follows. The presence moves, stepping forward from the structure. The motion is smooth, deliberate, and unmistakably controlled. It is no longer testing or circling. It is approaching. The distance between them closes slightly, and the tension rises immediately. Mara holds her ground. She does not step back, does not shift her position. Her posture remains steady, her focus unbroken. This is the clearest moment of direct engagement so far, and her response reflects that. She is not reacting. She is meeting it. The hum intensifies, the patterns on the floor brightening in response. The entire chamber feels active now, every element aligned with the interaction at its center. This synchronization adds weight to the moment. The presence stops a few steps away, holding position. For a brief moment, the distortion stabilizes more than it ever has before. The outline sharpens, revealing more detail beneath. Not fully, not clearly, but enough to confirm structure, form, and scale. It is no longer just an unseen force. It is something real, standing directly in front of them. Kellen exhales slowly, the tension in his body visible but controlled. This is what he has been anticipating, even if he did not want to face it. The reality of it lands quietly, without panic, but with weight. Mara studies it closely, her mind working through everything she has learned so far. The patterns, the responses, the structure, all of it connects here. This is not random. It is part of a system, one that operates with rules she is starting to understand. She takes a small step forward. The reaction is immediate. The presence shifts slightly, adjusting its stance, while the structure behind it responds with a surge of light. The hum spikes briefly, then stabilizes again. This cause and effect is clear, direct, and undeniable. Mara stops, processing the response. She is no longer testing blindly. She is confirming patterns. Every movement now is part of a larger understanding. Kellen remains still, watching the exchange. He does not interfere, trusting her approach even as the tension builds. This trust feels earned, built through every step they have taken together. The presence moves again, but this time it does not advance. It shifts to the side, creating a slight opening between itself and the structure. This movement is deliberate, and it changes the dynamic immediately. It is not blocking. It is allowing. Mara notices this instantly. The opening is not large, but it is clear. It suggests that the next step is not confrontation, but entry. This realization shifts the tension again, turning it from resistance into something else entirely. She looks at the structure, then back at the presence. The choice is clear. Kellen sees it too, his expression tightening as he understands what it means. This is not just another interaction. This is a threshold. Crossing it will change the situation in ways they cannot predict. Mara steps forward, not toward the presence, but through the opening it has created. The reaction is immediate but controlled. The hum deepens, the patterns on the floor align, and the structure's light intensifies, responding to her movement. The presence does not stop her. It holds its position, watching. Kellen hesitates for a fraction of a second, then follows. The moment he crosses into the central area, the chamber shifts again. The light grows stronger, the hum more layered, and the sense of being observed intensifies. This is no longer just a space they are moving through. It is a space they have entered. From a review perspective, this section marks a turning point. The film moves from controlled interaction into direct engagement with the core system. The presence becomes more defined, the environment more reactive, and the stakes higher. The pacing remains deliberate, allowing the weight of each moment to settle. The tension is no longer just about survival. It is about understanding what this system is and what it wants. By the end of this part, the story reaches the edge of its next phase. The characters have crossed into the center of the structure, and the rules that have guided them so far may no longer apply in the same way. What comes next will not just test their ability to survive. It will test their understanding of everything they have learned. Crossing into the center does not feel like movement. It feels like activation. The moment Mara steps fully inside the inner boundary, the entire chamber responds in a way that is immediate but controlled. The light running through the structure intensifies, not in brightness alone but in clarity, forming sharper lines that connect across its surface. The hum deepens into layered tones that feel synchronized rather than ambient. Everything aligns. Mara slows to a stop, her attention locked on the structure now towering directly in front of her. From this distance, the details are clearer. The surface is not static. It shifts in subtle ways, like overlapping segments adjusting in response to her presence. These movements are not random. They follow a pattern, one that feels intentional and measured. Kellen steps in behind her, his posture tightening as the space reacts to him as well. The moment he crosses the same boundary, there is a slight shift in the chamber's tone. The hum adjusts, layering another frequency into the existing pattern. It is not disruptive, but it is noticeable. The system is recognizing both of them independently. The presence remains just behind and to the side, holding position. It does not follow them in fully. It stays at the edge of the boundary, as if its role has shifted from interaction to observation. This change feels important. It suggests that whatever happens next is not controlled directly by it, but by the structure itself. Mara takes a slow step forward, moving deeper into the central area. The floor beneath her reacts immediately. The patterns align more tightly, lines converging toward her position before extending outward again. This response is direct and consistent. It confirms that movement within this space is not neutral. It is part of the system. She stops again, processing what she is seeing. The structure in front of her responds with another subtle shift. Sections along its surface rotate slightly, revealing new layers beneath. These layers carry markings similar to those seen throughout the passages, but here they are more refined, more complete. This feels like the origin point. Kellen watches closely, his focus divided between Mara and the structure. He does not move further in. Something about this space holds him back, not out of fear alone but instinct. He understands that proximity here matters more than anywhere else they have been. The hum changes again, becoming more rhythmic, almost like a sequence rather than a constant tone. Mara notices this immediately. She tilts her head slightly, listening, trying to match the rhythm to the changes in the structure. There is a connection forming, one that feels closer to communication than anything before. She raises her hand slowly, not reaching out to touch, but positioning it in front of her as if testing the space between. The response is immediate. The light within the structure shifts, aligning with her movement. The hum adjusts, its rhythm tightening slightly. This is the clearest interaction so far. Mara lowers her hand, then raises it again, this time slightly to the side. The structure responds again, mirroring the shift in position. The patterns on the floor adjust as well, extending toward her in a way that feels deliberate. This is not random reaction. It is structured response. Kellen steps forward slightly, drawn in despite himself. He watches the exchange with focused intensity. This is no longer just survival. It is something closer to understanding, and that realization changes how he sees the situation. Mara takes another step, closing the distance between herself and the structure. The response is stronger this time. The light intensifies, spreading across more of its surface, while the hum grows more complex, layering additional tones into the sequence. The presence at the edge shifts slightly, its outline tightening for a moment before stabilizing again. It is still observing, but its role feels reduced here. The structure is in control now. Mara stops just short of the structure, leaving a small gap between herself and its surface. She studies it closely, her eyes moving across the patterns, trying to read them. The markings here are not just decorative. They are functional. They carry meaning, even if she cannot fully interpret it yet. Kellen moves closer now, standing just behind her. His earlier hesitation fades, replaced by a cautious focus. He is no longer holding back. He is part of this moment, even if he does not fully understand it. The structure shifts again, and this time the change is more pronounced. A section of its surface separates slightly, creating a narrow opening. The movement is smooth, controlled, and deliberate. The light within that opening is different, more concentrated, almost directional. It draws attention immediately. Mara notices it and steps slightly to the side, adjusting her angle to see inside. The interior is not fully visible, but there is depth there, layers that extend inward beyond what the outer surface suggests. This is not just a solid object. It is something more complex. The hum changes again, aligning with the opening. The rhythm becomes more defined, almost like a sequence repeating. Mara listens carefully, her focus shifting from the visual to the auditory. There is a pattern here, one that feels structured enough to be followed. She takes a slow breath, then moves her hand again, this time closer to the opening. The response is immediate. The light within intensifies, and the hum tightens into a sharper sequence. This is confirmation. The structure is responding to specific inputs. Kellen watches, his attention locked on the interaction. He understands now that this is not random. There are rules here, and Mara is beginning to find them. Mara pauses, then makes a small adjustment, moving her hand slightly upward instead of forward. The response changes. The light shifts direction, and the hum alters its pattern. This variation confirms what she suspected. The system is not just reacting. It is processing. She lowers her hand again, stepping back slightly to reset. The structure responds by dimming slightly, returning to its previous state. This cause and effect is consistent, and it gives her something to work with. Kellen steps closer, now standing beside her rather than behind. His presence adds another variable, and the system reacts immediately. The hum shifts again, introducing a new tone that was not present before. The light adjusts, spreading slightly wider. Mara notices this and glances at him briefly. This is the first time his presence has directly altered the system at this level. It confirms that both of them are being processed independently. The opening altered the system at this level. It confirms that both of them are being processed independently. The opening in the structure widens slightly, responding to their combined presence. The light within becomes more intense, and the depth inside becomes clearer. It feels like an invitation, but not a simple one. It is conditional. Mara studies the opening, then the patterns around it. She is putting the pieces together now, connecting movement, position, and response. This is not just a structure. It is an interface. The realization lands quietly but clearly. Everything they have experienced so far, the patterns, the reactions, the presence, all of it has been leading to this point. This is where interaction becomes something more direct, more intentional. Kellen senses the shift in her understanding. He does not need her to explain it. He sees it in the way she moves, the way her focus sharpens. This is no longer exploration. It is engagement. Mara steps closer to the opening. The response is immediate and stronger than before. The light intensifies sharply, and the hum rises in pitch, creating a layered tone that fills the chamber. The patterns on the floor align tightly, converging toward the structure. The presence at the edge shifts again, its outline becoming more defined for a brief moment. It is reacting but still not intervening. Its role remains observational. Mara stops just before the opening, holding position. She does not enter yet. She studies the response, making sure she understands it before moving further. This restraint is critical. It shows how much she has learned. Kellen stands beside her, his posture steady. He is ready to follow, but he is also aware of the risk. This is not a simple step forward. It is a threshold. The hum stabilizes, settling into a steady sequence. The light holds, no longer intensifying but not fading either. The system is waiting. Mara takes one final step. She reaches out, not with urgency but with control, and places her hand just inside the opening. The reaction is immediate and unmistakable. The entire structure responds in a synchronized shift. Light surges across its surface, the hum deepens into a layered resonance, and the patterns on the floor lock into place. The chamber feels like it has reached a new state. Kellen feels it too, the shift in the air, the pressure, the alignment of everything around them. This is not just interaction anymore. It is activation. Mara holds her position, her hand steady. She does not pull back. She lets the system respond, watching closely for any change. Her focus is absolute. The opening widens further, the light inside becoming more stable, more defined. It no longer flickers or shifts. It holds. The system has accepted the input. From a review perspective, this section brings the film to a critical point. The slow build, the layered tension, and the controlled interactions all lead here. The structure is no longer just part of the environment. It is the center of it, and the characters are now directly engaging with it. The pacing remains deliberate, allowing the weight of this moment to settle fully. There is no rush, no sudden escalation. The tension is held, sustained, and deepened. By the end of this part, the story stands at a threshold that feels both earned and inevitable. The characters have moved from survival to understanding, and now into direct interaction with the core system. What happens next will define the outcome, not just of their survival, but of what this entire structure represents. The moment Mara's hand settles inside the opening, the reaction does not spike again. It stabilizes. That shift is more important than any surge. The system is no longer escalating in response to her presence. It is holding, maintaining a state that feels deliberate and sustained. The light within the structure becomes steady, no longer pulsing or shifting unpredictably. The hum settles into a layered tone that feels structured, almost like a continuous signal. Mara does not move. Her stillness is intentional. She understands that this is no longer about testing. It is about maintaining the state she has triggered. Her hand remains where it is, her posture controlled, her focus locked on the structure as it continues to respond. Kellen stands beside her, close enough to feel the change in the air. The pressure that filled the chamber before has transformed into something more stable. It is still intense, but it no longer feels unstable. It feels controlled, like the system has reached a balanced state. The opening widens further, not abruptly, but with smooth precision. The edges separate just enough to reveal more of what lies inside. The interior is not empty. It is layered, filled with shifting lines of light that move in coordinated patterns. These patterns resemble the markings they have seen before, but here they are complete, fully formed. Mara's eyes track those movements carefully. She is no longer guessing. She is observing something structured, something that operates with internal logic. The patterns move in cycles, repeating sequences that feel consistent. This is not random behavior. It is function. Kellen leans slightly forward, drawn in despite himself. From this angle, he can see deeper into the opening. The light does not just sit inside. It extends inward, forming pathways that stretch beyond what is immediately visible. This structure is not just a surface. It is a system with depth. The hum shifts slightly, not in intensity but in tone. It introduces a higher layer, a subtle frequency that sits above the rest. Mara notices it immediately. Her focus sharpens further. This change is not accidental. It is a response to sustained contact. She adjusts her hand slightly, moving it just a fraction deeper. The reaction is precise. The patterns inside the structure accelerate briefly, then settle into a new rhythm. The light shifts direction, aligning more tightly with her position. The hum adjusts again, incorporating the new input into its layered tone. This is confirmation. The system is responding to depth, not just presence. Kellen watches closely, his understanding growing with each interaction. This is no longer abstract. It is structured. It follows rules, even if those rules are not fully clear yet. Mara pauses again, holding her position. She does not push further immediately. Instead, she observes the changes, letting them stabilize. This restraint is deliberate. She is not trying to force a reaction. She is trying to understand it. The presence at the edge of the chamber shifts slightly. It does not approach, but its outline becomes more defined for a brief moment. It is reacting but not interfering. Its role remains separate from the structure, even as it responds to the same changes. This distinction becomes clearer now. Kellen glances toward it, then back to Mara. He understands that whatever happens next is centered here, not at the edge. The presence is no longer the primary focus. The structure is. Mara takes a slow breath, then makes another adjustment. She rotates her hand slightly, changing the angle rather than the position. The response is immediate and different. The patterns inside the structure shift direction, forming new alignments that were not present before. The light reorganizes, creating sharper lines that intersect at precise points. The hum changes again, introducing a new sequence within its layered tone. This variation confirms something critical. The system is not just reacting to movement. It is interpreting it. Mara's expression tightens slightly, not from fear but focus. She is beginning to understand the level of control required here. This is not simple interaction. It is communication through movement and position. Kellen steps slightly closer, careful not to disrupt her position. His presence adds another variable, and the system responds immediately. The hum adjusts, adding another layer that sits alongside the existing sequence. The light inside the structure expands slightly, accommodating both inputs. Mara notices this and glances at him briefly. This is the first time their combined presence has created a more complex response. It suggests that the system is capable of processing multiple inputs at once. She nods slightly, more to herself than to him, then returns her focus to the structure. The opening widens again, slowly, revealing more of the internal layers. The depth becomes clearer now. There are multiple levels inside, each carrying its own patterns and light sequences. These levels move independently but remain synchronized. Kellen leans in slightly more, his earlier hesitation replaced by controlled curiosity. He is no longer resisting the pull of this space. He is part of it now, whether he wants to be or not. The hum stabilizes again, settling into a steady, complex tone. It no longer shifts unpredictably. It holds, like a system that has reached operational balance. Mara takes one more step forward. Her hand moves deeper into the opening, crossing a point that feels like a boundary. The reaction is immediate and stronger than before, but still controlled. The entire structure responds in unison. Light surges across all visible layers, the patterns align sharply, and the hum deepens into a fuller, more resonant tone. The chamber itself seems to respond, the walls reflecting faint echoes of the same patterns. Kellen feels it instantly, the shift in pressure, the alignment of everything around them. This is not just interaction anymore. It is integration. Mara holds her position, her focus unwavering. She does not pull back. She lets the system respond fully, watching every detail. The patterns inside the structure begin to slow. Not stop, but slow into a more defined sequence. The light becomes more stable, less fluid, forming shapes that hold longer before shifting. These shapes resemble the markings they have seen throughout the structure, but now they are clearer, more complete. Mara studies them closely, her mind working to interpret what she is seeing. The repetition is clearer now. The sequences are not random. They follow a logic that feels structured enough to understand. Kellen watches her, then the patterns trying to follow her focus. He cannot interpret them the same way, but he recognizes the shift. This is no longer just reaction. It is output. The system is showing something. Mara adjusts her hand again, this time slightly retracting it. The response is immediate. The patterns shift back, the light reorganizes, and the hum adjusts accordingly. This confirms the relationship. Input changes output in predictable ways. She moves her hand forward again, then slightly to the side. Each movement produces a different variation in the patterns. The system is responding in a way that feels almost like language. Kellen exhales slowly, the realization settling in. This is not just a structure. It is something that communicates, even if the method is unfamiliar. Mara continues, making small, controlled adjustments. Each movement is deliberate, each response observed carefully. She is building a framework, piece by piece, mapping input to output. The patterns begin to stabilize into longer sequences. The shapes hold for extended moments, repeating in cycles that feel consistent. Mara focuses on one sequence in particular, tracking its repetition. There is a rhythm to it, a structure, something that could be interpreted. The hum aligns with it, reinforcing the pattern through sound as well as light. This dual signal strengthens the idea that the system is not just reacting. It is conveying. Mara stills her hand, holding it in a specific position. The pattern stabilizes completely. For the first time, it does not shift. It holds. The light forms a clear, repeating sequence that remains consistent across multiple cycles. The hum aligns perfectly with it, creating a stable, unified signal. Kellen leans slightly closer, his eyes fixed on the pattern. Even without fully understanding it, he can see the consistency. This is not random. It is intentional. Mara's expression changes slightly.